Example 7, solving a cubic equation. We want to solve x cubed plus 8 equals 0 using factoring first and the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and write this out. We have x cubed plus 8, which is equal to 0. Okay, so we need to factor this x cubed plus 8. Now, since this is a plus, then we're dealing with the formula of the sum of cubes. So we need to find a formula, or at least the form of x cubed plus 8, so it looks like this first part, and then we can factor it in this form here. So in order to do that, we're going to rewrite this by saying, okay, well, what do I need to cube to get x cubed? Well, that's x. And what do I need to cube to get 8? Well, that number is 2. And that's equal to 0. So now if we take a look at this formula, we're going to know what a and b represents. So we know that a is equal to x, and we know that b is equal to 2. So underneath here, I'm just going to rewrite the factored form over here. So this is a plus b times a squared minus a times b plus b squared. And we know that that's going to end up equaling 0. So let's plug in our values for a and b. We know that a is equal to x, and we know that b is 2. So that's x plus 2 times x squared minus a, which is x, times b, which is 2, plus b, which is 2, and we're going to square that and then set that equal to 0. Now we're going to simplify. So we have x squared times, if we square the x, this is going to become x squared, minus x times 2, which is 2x, plus 2 squared, which is 4, and that's equal to 0. So now what we want to do is we're going to use the 0 factor property. So we're going to let x plus 2 equal 0. Or x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. Now on the left side, we can solve for x because x is going to equal negative 2. But on the right side, we can't factor that. And that's where we have to use the quadratic formula. So using the quadratic formula, we know the value of a is equal to 1. We know the value of b is negative 2. And the value of c is positive 4. And now we're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Now remember, it's going to be negative b, so that's going to be a negative times a negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's negative 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 4, all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. So let's simplify this even more. A negative times a negative is going to give us a positive 2, plus or minus, we have the square root of negative 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 1 times 4, which gives us 16, and then 2 times 1 is going to give us 2. Now let's simplify this. So we have 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 16 is going to give us negative 12, and then we're going to divide that by 2. Okay, so this square root of negative 12, we need to factor out the square root of negative 1, the square root of the perfect square 4, and the square root of 3. So that's going to give us the square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 3, and we know that the square root of negative 1 is I. So x is going to equal 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3I over 2. But then we can simplify this a little further. So this is 2 divided by 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3 over 2I. And so ultimately 2 divided by 2 is 1, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 again is 1, so that's plus or minus the square root of 3I. So over here, x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 3I. Now going back to the beginning, we can see that this is a cubic equation, which means we have 3 solutions. One of them is a real solution, and the other 2 are imaginary solutions. So in our solution set, we would have the following. We have negative 2, 1 minus the square root of 3I, and 1 plus the square root of 3I. Or you can also write it in the simplified form where it's negative 2, and that's 1 plus or minus the square root of 3I. And again, we have one real solution, and we have 2 imaginary solutions.